My name is Hannah Mitchell, and I'm 24 years old. After Mom's funeral, Dad gave me up for adoption and moved his new family into our house. I was 13, standing in what used to be my room, watching him hand me papers that would erase me from his life, while his new wife measured the windows for different curtains. 11 years later, at my wedding, with 150 guests watching, he showed up uninvited, tears streaming down his face, begging for the father-daughter dance he'd thrown away. "Let him in," I told security, my wedding dress rustling as I walked toward the man who'd chosen his new family over his grieving daughter. Everyone needs to hear this. What I revealed about the adoption papers he'd signed without reading made half our guests pull out their phones, recording every word. But the real shock came when my stepsister, the girl who'd taken my room, my father's attention, my place at our dinner table, suddenly stood up from where she'd been hiding in the crowd. Before I tell you what she said that changed everything, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with what I'm about to share. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Let me take you back to where it all began. When I was 10 years old, life felt perfect. My mother, Laura Mitchell, owned a successful logistics company that she'd built from the ground up. She was the kind of woman who could negotiate a contract in the morning, inspect a fleet of delivery vans in the afternoon, and still make it home in time to help me with my homework. She taught me about business over dinner, profit margins, customer loyalty, the importance of keeping your word. My father, Thomas, worked in the company's administrative office. He handled paperwork, managed schedules, answered phones. He was good at his job, but it bothered him that he wasn't the primary breadwinner. I'd hear him sometimes late at night telling Mom that he wished he could be the man of the house the way his father had been. Mom would laugh gently and remind him that they were partners, that his contributions mattered just as much as hers. But I could see it in his eyes, the way he'd tense up when business associates assumed he owned the company. The forced smile when Mom made the final decisions about expansion or new hires. He wanted to prove himself. He wanted to be the hero. Then, 2 weeks after my 12th birthday, Mom died in a highway accident. One of her own vans driven by a new hire who'd fallen asleep at the wheel. She was gone instantly. At the funeral, Dad stood rigid beside me, shaking hands with mourners, accepting condolences. He didn't cry. He just kept saying, "I'll take care of everything now. I'll handle it." I didn't know then that he'd been waiting for this chance, not for Mom to die, but for the opportunity to finally be in charge, to prove he could run things without her shadow over him. And I definitely didn't know that his need to prove himself would cost me everything. 6 months after Mom's funeral, Dad brought Emily home. "Hannah, this is Emily," he said, standing in our living room with his arm around a woman I'd never seen before. "We're getting married next month." I was 12 and a half. I was still sleeping with Mom's cardigan under my pillow. And suddenly, there was a stranger in our house smiling at me like we were already family. "I'm so excited to get to know you," Emily said. Her voice was bright, cheerful. "And you'll love Olivia, my daughter. She's 9. You'll be like sisters." Within 2 weeks, Emily moved in with her entire family, her mother Dorothy and her daughter Olivia. Within a month, my room was cut in half to make space for Olivia. Mom's belongings, her desk, her photos, her awards from the business were packed into boxes and carried down to the basement. "We need to move forward," Dorothy announced one evening, directing the movers like a general commanding troops. "This house needs to feel like a fresh start." I stood in the hallway, watching them erase my mother. "Can I at least keep Mom's desk in my room?" I asked. Dorothy turned to me with a tight smile. "Sweetheart, you're being selfish. Olivia needs space too. Your father is trying to build a new life. The least you can do is be supportive." At dinner that night, Emily sat in Mom's chair at the head of the table. Dad sat beside her, holding her hand. I sat at the far end next to Olivia, who chatted about her new school, while Dorothy nodded approvingly. Nobody asked me how my day was. Nobody noticed that I'd barely touched my food. I was becoming invisible in my own home, and it had only been 6 months since Mom died. 4 months after Emily moved in, Dad sold Mom's company. I found out by accident. I came home from school and heard him on the phone in his office, the door half open. "Yes, I accept your offer. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers." I knocked. "Dad, what offer?" He looked up startled. "Hannah, I didn't hear you come in. You're selling the company." He closed his laptop. "It's the right decision. I've been trying to run it, but I'm not your mother. I don't have her instincts for this business, but you could learn or hire someone to help. Mom built that company for us. Your mother built it for herself," he said. And there was an edge to his voice I'd never heard before. "I'm doing what's best for this family. We need a fresh start." "What about my future?" "Mom always said I'd learn the business when I was older." "You're 12, Hannah. You don't understand how business works." The company sold 3 weeks later for less than it was worth. My Uncle David, Mom's younger brother, a corporate lawyer, called Dad repeatedly, trying to talk him out of it. But Dad had already made up his mind. "He's panicking." Uncle David told me when he took me out for ice cream one Saturday. "He's selling because he's scared of failing. But that company was your inheritance, Hannah. Your mother wanted you to have it. Can't you stop him?" David's jaw tightened. "He's the legal heir. I can't intervene unless there's evidence of fraud or incompetence. But I'm documenting everything. Every financial decision, every conversation, just in case." I didn't understand what he meant by just in case. But years later, those documents would become my shield. My 13th birthday fell on a Saturday. There was no party, no cake. Emily, Dorothy, and Olivia had gone shopping for Olivia's upcoming school dance. I sat in the living room pretending to read, trying not to care that nobody had acknowledged the date. "Hannah, come here." Dad called from his office. I found him sitting at his desk, a manila envelope in front of him. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "Sit down. We need to talk." I sat. He pushed the envelope toward me. "I need you to understand something. I love you, but I can't do this alone." "Do what?" "Raise you. Be a single parent. I'm not strong like your mother was." My hands started shaking. "What are you saying?" "Uncle David and Aunt Elizabeth have agreed to adopt you. They'll give you a stable home, a good education, everything you need." I opened the envelope. Legal documents, adoption papers, my name printed at the top in official font. "You're giving me away. I'm doing what's best for everyone. Emily and I need space to build our family. You remind her of everything I lost. It's not fair to anyone. I'm your daughter and I'm trying to do right by you. David and Elizabeth love you. They'll take care of you. But you're my dad." "Doesn't that mean anything?" He looked away. "I signed the papers this morning. David will pick you up next weekend." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. "Why?" "Because Emily said she couldn't be a mother to you when you clearly don't want her to be. And she's right. We all need a fresh start." He stood up, walked to the door. "Pack your things. I'll help you move next Saturday." Then he left me sitting there holding the papers that would erase me from his life. That night, Uncle David came over. He found me in my half room, surrounded by boxes that were supposed to be for Olivia's things, but now held my entire childhood. "Your dad called me," he said quietly, sitting on the edge of my bed. "He told me what happened. He's giving me away." "I know." David's voice was steady, controlled, and I want you to understand what that means legally. He pulled out a folder. "Always the lawyer, always prepared. If you sign these papers, you'll lose certain rights. Your legal connection to your father will be terminated. That means no inheritance, No claim to any assets he might have, no access to family records or belongings that are currently in this house. I don't care about money. I know you don't. But your mother's jewelry is here, her photos, her personal documents. If you're no longer legally his daughter, he has no obligation to give you anything. I hadn't thought about that. Mom's wedding ring, her grandmother's necklace, the photo albums from when I was little. What if I don't sign? Then he'd have to go to court to terminate his parental rights, and I'd fight him every step of the way. It would be ugly, public, and expensive. But you'd have a voice in the process. Would I have to stay here in this house? David's expression softened. No, you could come live with Elizabeth and me while the case proceeds. Either way, you're not staying here. Then what's the point of fighting? He doesn't want me. Emily doesn't want me. Why force them to keep me? Because David said, actions should have consequences, and I want to make sure he can't just erase you without accountability. A week later, I signed the papers, but Uncle David added something Dad didn't bother to read carefully. We sat in David's law office, me, David, Aunt Elizabeth, and Dad. Emily had stayed home, claiming she didn't want to make things more emotional. David slid the revised adoption agreement across the table. Everything's in order. Hannah will be legally our daughter as of today. Dad barely glanced at the pages. He just flipped to the signature lines. Wait, David said. You should read page 3, paragraph 7. I trust you, Dad said, already signing. You're doing me a favor here. David's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I watched Dad sign away his rights to me in less than 5 minutes. No hesitation, no second thoughts, just quick, efficient strokes of the pen, like he was signing off on a business transaction. There, Dad said, standing up. I'll have Hannah's things ready by this weekend. After he left, I turned to David. What was on page 3? He showed me the clause. If your father ever wants to re-establish parental rights or re-enter your life in an official capacity, he must compensate Elizabeth and me for all documented costs of raising you. Tuition, medical expenses, housing, food, extracurriculars, everything with interest. Will that actually work? It's legally binding. He signed it. If he ever tries to come back, he'll owe us every penny we've spent on you. Aunt Elizabeth squeezed my hand. This isn't about money, Hannah. It's about making sure he understands that walking away has consequences. You're not disposable. That weekend, I moved into their home. The guest room had been repainted in my favorite color. There were fresh flowers on the dresser, a framed photo of Mom on the nightstand. This is your home now, Elizabeth said. Not temporary home. 5 years passed. I graduated high school with a full scholarship to study architecture at a top university. Uncle David and Aunt Elizabeth threw me a graduation party in their backyard. 30 people, a cake with my name on it, speeches about my future. I'd stopped thinking of myself as the girl who'd been given away. I was Hannah Mitchell, daughter of David and Elizabeth Mitchell. They'd chosen me. They'd shown up to every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every late-night breakdown when I missed my mom. They never tried to replace her. Mom's photo sat on the mantel alongside pictures of David and Elizabeth's wedding. They talked about her often, funny stories, business advice she'd given David, the way she'd always known how to make people feel valued. Your mother would be so proud of you, Elizabeth said at my graduation party, hugging me tight. And I believed her because David and Elizabeth had made sure I knew my mother's legacy wasn't just a logistics company Dad had sold. It was resilience, integrity, the belief that family meant showing up. I called them Uncle David and Aunt Elizabeth, never Mom and Dad. It felt right, honoring what they'd done without trying to erase my mother. They never pushed me to call them anything else. Then the week before I started college, I got a message from Olivia. I miss you. Things aren't the same here. I stared at my phone. I hadn't heard from her in 5 years. We'd been strangers sharing a house for 6 months, and then I disappeared from her life completely. I didn't respond right away. I needed time to process. But that message was the first crack in the perfect facade Dad had built, and I didn't know it yet, but the whole house was about to crumble. The email came on the day I received my scholarship notification. Subject line: I'm proud of you. I almost deleted it without opening, but curiosity won. Hannah, I've been following your achievements online. I saw that you received a full scholarship to study architecture. That's incredible. I always knew you were brilliant. I hope we can reconnect soon. Enough time has passed. I'd love to hear about your life, Dad. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done, just casual words as if we'd simply lost touch over the years, instead of him legally erasing me from his life. I showed the email to Uncle David. He doesn't get to waltz back in without accountability, David said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I didn't respond to the email. A week later, another one arrived. I know I made mistakes. I hope we can talk soon. Mistakes. As if giving your daughter up for adoption was equivalent to forgetting her birthday or missing a school play. I still didn't respond. Then 2 weeks into my freshman year, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hannah, it's Dad. My stomach dropped. How did you get this number? I called David's office. His assistant gave it to me. A lie. David would never allow that. What do you want? I miss you. I know things ended badly, but I'd like to explain. Explain what? That you chose your new family over me. That you signed me away on my 13th birthday. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking clearly enough to remarry 6 months after Mom died and move Emily's entire family into our house. Silence on the line. Can we meet, please? I want to make things right. I don't think I'm ready for that. When will you be ready? I don't know. Maybe never. I hung up. He called again 3 days later. This time I let it go to voicemail. Hannah, I know you're angry, but I'm still your father. We can work through this. I played the message for Elizabeth during dinner. He still doesn't get it, she said, shaking her head. He thinks this is about anger. It's not. It's about trust. And he destroyed that. The calls continued once a week, then twice. Short messages. Thinking of you. Hope you're doing well. Would love to hear your voice. Never an actual apology. Never acknowledgement of the specific harm he'd caused. Then Uncle David got a call. Your father contacted my office. David told me one evening. He asked about visitation rights. I'm 19. There's no such thing as visitation rights. I know I told him that, but he seems to think he can just reinsert himself into your life, like you're a possession he loaned out and now wants back. What did you tell him? I reminded him that he signed away his parental rights, that you're legally our daughter now, that if he wants to be part of your life, it's entirely your decision and yours alone. How did he respond? He said I was turning you against him. I laughed bitterly. He turned me against him when he handed me adoption papers on my birthday. David's expression was serious. Hannah, I need you to understand something. If he keeps pushing, if he starts showing up places or contacting you persistently, that's harassment. You have legal options. I don't want to go to court. I know, but I want you to know you have power here. He doesn't get to decide the terms of reconciliation. You do. That knowledge that I had control changed something in me. I wasn't the powerless 13-year-old anymore. When I turned 21, Uncle David called me into his law office. I need to show you something, he said, pulling out the adoption agreement from 8 years ago. I'd never actually read the full document. I'd been 13, traumatized, just trying to survive. But now, David opened it to page 3 and pointed to paragraph 7. Read this. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. If Thomas Mitchell seeks to reestablish parental rights or legal relationship with Hannah Mitchell, he must compensate David and Elizabeth Mitchell for all documented costs associated with raising Hannah, including but not limited to education, medical care, housing, food, clothing, extracurricular activities, and therapy. Compensation must include interest calculated at the legal rate from the date of adoption finalization. You've been keeping records? I asked. Every receipt, every tuition payment, every doctor's visit, every music lesson, every school trip, every winter coat. David pulled out a thick folder. 8 years of documentation. How much as of today? Approximately $180,000. I stared at the number. That's what it costs to raise a child properly. And your father agreed to these terms when he signed. He just didn't bother to read what he was signing. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're an adult. If he approaches you again, and I think he will, you need to know you have leverage. Not to punish him, but to protect yourself. Don't want his money. This isn't about money, Hannah. It's about making sure he can't just erase the consequences of his choices. He walked away. He doesn't get to walk back in without accountability. I looked at the folder. Years of careful documentation. David had been protecting me all along, building a shield I didn't know I'd need. A week later, Aunt Elizabeth asked me to come to her office at the university where she taught psychology. I want to show you something, she said, opening a locked filing cabinet. I've been keeping records too. She pulled out a thick binder. My name was written on the spine. Inside were session notes from the therapist she'd found for me when I first moved in, a therapist I'd seen for 3 years. Notes about my depression, my anxiety about abandonment, my fear that David and Elizabeth would give me away too. There were also printed emails, messages from Thomas over the years, birthday cards sent to David's address, Christmas emails, occasional texts asking about me, all of them surface level. None of them acknowledging what he'd done. I kept these as documentation, Elizabeth explained, not to hurt him, but to preserve the truth. If anyone ever questions your decision to maintain boundaries, you have proof of the pattern. She showed me one more document, an email from Emily to Thomas that Elizabeth had received through legal channels during the adoption process. We can't have her back. She'll ruin what we've built. Dorothy agrees. The girl needs to stay with David. I read it 3 times. Emily had explicitly told Dad not to reconsider. It wasn't just his decision. It was coordinated. I didn't want you to see this when you were younger, Elizabeth said, but now you need to know. This wasn't about him being overwhelmed or grieving. This was calculated. Does he know you have this? No. And he doesn't need to. But if he ever tries to rewrite history to claim he was forced or didn't have a choice, you have evidence. I closed the binder. You've been protecting me all along. That's what real parents do, Elizabeth said simply. We choose you every day. I met Nathan at a tech architecture conference during my junior year. He was presenting software that created 3D simulations for architectural designs. I was in the audience fascinated by the intersection of technology and creativity. After his presentation, I approached him with questions. You're thinking about user experience, he said, impressed. Most architects focus on aesthetics. You're thinking about how people will actually live in the space. We got coffee, then dinner. Then he walked me back to my hotel and we talked for 3 hours in the lobby about design philosophy and childhood dreams and what makes a house feel like home. On our 3rd date, I told him about my father. I expected him to be uncomfortable to offer platitudes about forgiveness and family. Instead, he listened. Really listened. That must have been devastating, he said finally. Not just losing your mom, but then losing your dad by his own choice. I didn't lose him, he gave me away. Exactly. There's a difference. Nathan reached across the table and took my hand. Your past doesn't define you, Hannah, but how you've grown from it, that's incredible. He never tried to fix me, never suggested I owed my father another chance. He just accepted that I'd built a new family with David and Elizabeth, and that was enough. 2 years later, when Nathan proposed, he asked David for permission first. Not because I needed anyone's permission, but because he respected who my real father was. I'd be honored, David said, his voice thick with emotion. We started planning the wedding. Small ceremony, close friends and family, garden venue. I sent invitations to everyone important to me. I didn't send one to Thomas, but somehow 3 weeks before the wedding, he found out, and he decided it was his chance to make things right. The engagement party was at an upscale restaurant downtown. 60 guests, elegant lighting, champagne flowing freely. I was mid-conversation with Nathan's sister when the room went quiet. I turned. Thomas stood in the doorway wearing a tailored suit I knew he couldn't have afforded years ago. He held a wrapped gift box, his expression hopeful and nervous. He walked straight toward our table. Hannah, he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Nathan stood immediately, positioning himself slightly in front of me. Uncle David was already moving from his seat across the room. Dad. My voice came out steadier than I felt. What are you doing here? I heard the good news. I wanted to celebrate with you. This is a private event. I didn't invite you. I'm your father. I don't need an invitation. Around us, guests watched. Some knew my history. Most didn't. I could see the confusion on their faces. Why was the bride-to-be turning away her father? You haven't been my father for 11 years, I said quietly. That's not fair. I've been trying to reconnect. Trying? You sent a few emails, made 3 phone calls in 11 years. I gave you space. I thought that's what you wanted. I wanted a father who didn't give up on me. Nathan touched my arm gently. Sir, I think it's best if you leave. This is Hannah's day. Thomas's eyes flashed. You don't get to tell me to leave. This is about my daughter. She's not your daughter, Uncle David said, arriving at our table. His voice was calm but firm. Not legally, not in any way that matters. You sign those rights away. Thomas looked around at the watching guests, seeming to realize for the first time how public this confrontation had become. Thomas didn't leave. Instead, he turned to the watching guests, his voice rising. I know this looks bad, but I'm her father. We've had some misunderstandings, but family is family, right? Several guests shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded uncertainly. I felt the familiar pressure, the social expectation to smooth things over, to avoid a scene, to protect everyone else's comfort at the expense of my own truth. But I was done protecting him. Dad, you're not my legal father anymore. You signed away your rights when I was 13. Gasps rippled through the room. Nathan's mother put her hand over her mouth. That was a mistake, Thomas said quickly. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking clearly enough to remarry 6 months after Mom died. Clearly enough to move your new family into our house. Clearly enough to pack my mother's belongings into the basement so Emily wouldn't have to see them. More whispers. Guests were pulling out their phones, some recording, some texting. I did what I thought was best. Best for who? Not for me. You gave me away on my 13th birthday, Dad. You handed me adoption papers and told me Emily couldn't be a mother to me because I didn't want her to be. You chose your new wife's comfort over your own daughter. Thomas's face flushed. You're making this sound worse than it was. Am I? I looked around at the guests. How many of you would sign away your child? Would any of you hand your 13-year-old adoption papers 6 months after their mother died? Silence. Heavy, damning silence. Uncle David stepped forward. Thomas, this is not the time or place. Leave now or I'll call security. I have a right to be here. She's my daughter. No, David said firmly. She's not. Not legally, not emotionally. You made sure of that. If you've ever had to set boundaries with someone who hurt you, you know how hard it is, especially when they're family. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to stand your ground in a public setting? How did it feel? And if this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything. Now, let's get back to what happened next, because the real confrontation was still to come. After security escorted Thomas out, he left quietly. Finally, when the restaurant manager got involved, I sat with Nathan, Elizabeth, and David in a quiet corner. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. I'm not inviting him to the wedding, I said. I don't care if people think I'm heartless. You're not heartless, Elizabeth said immediately. You're protecting your peace. Nathan squeezed my hand. It's your day, Hannah. You decide who gets to be there. If he shows up uninvited again, David said, his jaw tight. I'll handle it. You focus on being happy. That night, I sent Thomas an email. Dad, I appreciate that you want to reconnect, but I'm not ready. Please respect my boundaries and do not come to my wedding. I need this day to be about the family I've built, the people who chose to stay. His response came within an hour. I understand, but I hope one day you'll forgive me. I made mistakes, but I'm still your father. That has to count for something. I'll respect your wishes about the wedding, but know that I love you. I always have. I read it 3 times, looking for the apology that wasn't there. I made mistakes. Wasn't the same as I'm sorry I gave you up for adoption. I love you. Didn't erase 12 years of absence. Do you think he'll actually stay away? I asked Nathan. He was quiet for a moment. I think he'll try one more time. Men like him, they don't believe consequences apply to them. If he shows up, I'll be ready, I said. But I didn't know how ready I'd need to be, or that the confrontation at my engagement party was just the rehearsal for what would happen at my wedding. My wedding day was perfect. The garden venue was exactly what I dreamed of. White chairs arranged in neat rows, flower arrangements in soft pink and cream. A string quartet playing as guests arrived. 150 people, all of them chosen carefully. Friends from college, Nathan's family, my colleagues, and the people who mattered most, Uncle David and Aunt Elizabeth. In the bridal suite, Elizabeth helped me with my dress, a simple A-line gown with delicate lace sleeves. You look just like your mother did on her wedding day, she said softly, adjusting my veil. Uncle David knocked on the door. Ready? He wore a classic tuxedo, his eyes bright with emotion. When he saw me, he stopped. Hannah, you're beautiful. Thank you for doing this, I said. For walking me down the aisle, for being the father I needed. It's been my honor. His voice cracked slightly. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become. We had 30 minutes before the ceremony. I was taking a moment to breathe, to center myself, when one of the security staff knocked urgently. Ms. Mitchell, there's a situation at the front gate. My stomach dropped. What kind of situation? A man claiming to be your father? He's asking to speak with you. He says it's urgent. I looked at Elizabeth. She was already reaching for her phone. Tell him he's not on the guest list. I said he needs to leave. The security guard shifted uncomfortably. He's refusing to leave, ma'am. He's saying he has a right to be here. Some of your guests are arriving and they're noticing. Nathan appeared in the doorway. I'll handle it, No, I said, my voice firm. I will because this was my wedding, my day, and I was done letting Thomas Mitchell control any part of my life. I walked to the front gate in my wedding dress, Nathan and Uncle David flanking me. Thomas stood just outside the wrought iron entrance holding an enormous bouquet of roses. He dressed for a wedding. Expensive suit, polished shoes, boutonniere already pinned to his lapel. Behind him, I could see arriving guests slowing down watching. Some had their phones out. Hannah. His face lit up when he saw me. You look beautiful. I told you not to come. Please, just 5 minutes. I need to talk to you. Why can't you respect my boundaries? Because I'm your father. I made a mistake, and I want to make it right. A small crowd was gathering now. Guests who'd arrived early, the catering staff, the photographer, all watching. You had 12 years to make it right. Why now? Because I realized I can't move forward without you in my life. You moved forward just fine when you signed those papers. I was wrong. I was scared. I didn't know how to be a single parent. You weren't single. You had Emily. His expression shifted, became pleading. Emily and I were having problems. She thinks I should let go of the past, but I can't. You're my daughter. And there it was, the truth beneath the apology. So, you're here because your marriage is failing. My voice was steady, clear. Not because you actually care about me, because you're lonely and you need someone to fill the gap. That's not fair. What's not fair is showing up at my wedding uninvited after 12 years of minimal contact. What's not fair is expecting me to comfort you because your choices finally caught up with you. More guests were stopping now, forming a semicircle around the gate. I could feel their attention, their judgment hanging in the air. It was time to tell the truth. All of it publicly. I turned to face the growing crowd of guests. I'm sorry you have to witness this, I said, my voice carrying across the garden entrance. But since many of you are wondering what's happening, let me explain. I gestured to Thomas. This is Thomas Mitchell, my biological father. When I was 13 years old, 6 months after my mother died in a logistics accident, he gave me up for adoption. He signed legal documents terminating his parental rights so he could start a new family without me being part of it. The crowd was completely silent. Several people had tears in their eyes. The man who will walk me down the aisle today is David Mitchell, my uncle, who adopted me and raised me with his wife, Elizabeth. They didn't have to take me in. They chose to. They chose me every single day for the past 12 years. They are my real parents. Not because of blood, but because they showed up when it mattered. Thomas's face had gone pale. Hannah, please don't do this. Don't do what? Tell the truth. You made your choice in private. I'm making mine in public. I looked at him directly. You don't get to erase 12 years of absence by showing up with flowers and apologies. You don't get to walk into my wedding and pretend you've been a father to me. That's not how family works. I made a mistake. No, mistakes are forgetting a birthday or saying the wrong thing. You legally erased me from your life. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. Uncle David stepped forward, his hand on my shoulder. Thomas, if you truly want to reestablish a relationship with Hannah, there's a legal process for that. One you agreed to when you signed the adoption papers. Thomas looked confused. What are you talking about? Let me show you, David said. I know this is intense, but sometimes setting boundaries means standing firm even when it's uncomfortable. If you're invested in this story, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. It helps more people find stories like this. And drop a comment. Do you think Hannah is doing the right thing, or should she give her dad another chance? Let's get back to what happened next. Uncle David pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket, always prepared. This is the adoption agreement you signed 12 years ago, he said, handing it to Thomas. Page 3, paragraph 7. Read it. Thomas unfolded the papers, his hands shaking slightly. His eyes scanned the page, then stopped. What is this? It's the clause you agreed to when you signed away your rights. If you wish to reclaim parental rights or re-enter Hannah's life in an official capacity, you must compensate Elizabeth and me for all costs incurred in raising Hannah. Every expense documented and verified. I never agreed to this. David pointed to the signature line. That's your signature right there. Dated and notarized. I stepped forward. Uncle David kept meticulous records. Tuition, medical expenses, housing, food, clothing, music lessons, therapy, summer camps, everything. The total as of today is $237,000. The guests gasped. Several people pulled out their phones, clearly calculating what it would cost to raise a child properly. Thomas's face went white. I don't have that kind of money. Then you don't have the right to be here, I said simply. This is blackmail. No, David interrupted. This is accountability. You can't walk away from your responsibilities and then walk back in without consequences. The law is very clear on this. Hannah, please. Thomas looked at me desperately. I'm your father. Doesn't that mean anything? You were my father, I said. But you chose not to be, and I've accepted that. These people, I gestured to David and Elizabeth, to Nathan, to the guests who'd supported me through college and career and life. They're my family. They earned that title. Thomas stood there, the adoption papers hanging limply in his hand, finally understanding that some choices can't be undone. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Hannah, I'm your father. Doesn't that mean anything? It used to, I said, when I was 12 and needed you. When I was 13 and begged you not to give me away. It doesn't mean anything now. People make mistakes. I made a mistake. You keep saying that, but giving your daughter up for adoption isn't a mistake. It's a choice. A deliberate, documented, legally binding choice. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking straight. Uncle David was grieving too. He lost his sister, my mother. But he didn't abandon me. Aunt Elizabeth didn't even know me well, but she opened her home and her heart. They made sacrifices. You made excuses. The guests were completely silent now. I could see some of them nodding, others wiping their eyes. So that's it? Thomas asked. You'll never forgive me. Forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. I've forgiven you for my own peace. I had to, or the anger would have destroyed me. But forgiving you doesn't mean I owe you a relationship. I'm trying to make amends. You're trying to ease your guilt. There's a difference. I took a breath. Dad, I hope you find peace. I really do, but you won't find it by crashing my wedding and demanding a place you didn't earn. Nathan moved closer, his hand on my back. Elizabeth stood on my other side. Uncle David remained between me and Thomas, a quiet guardian. The ceremony starts in 15 minutes, I said. You need to leave. If you care about me at all, you'll respect this boundary. Thomas looked at the gathered crowd, at the security guards waiting nearby, at the adoption papers still in his hand. Finally, he nodded. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't change the past and it doesn't earn you a future with me. I watched Thomas walk back to his car. Emily was waiting there. I could see her in the passenger seat, her face tight with anger or embarrassment. I couldn't tell which. He got in. The car pulled away. I turned back to the guests who'd witnessed everything. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked supportive. A few were openly crying. Thank you for your patience, I said, managing a smile. And thank you for being here to celebrate love and family, the kind that shows up, not just the kind that shares DNA. Applause broke out, quiet at first, then growing. Several guests came forward to hug me. That took courage, one of my colleagues said. You handled that with so much grace, another added. Nathan's mother embraced me. Welcome to the family, our real family. Uncle David pulled me aside. Are you okay? I am, I said, and realized it was true. I felt lighter, freer. I'm ready to get married now. He smiled, his eyes bright. Then let's not keep your groom waiting. Elizabeth fixed my veil, which had gotten slightly disheveled. Your mother would be so proud of you, she whispered. The ceremony was beautiful. David walked me down the aisle with steady steps, his hand firm and reassuring on my arm. When we reached the altar, he kissed my cheek and whispered, I've been ready for this moment for 12 years. Nathan and I exchanged vows, promises about choosing each other every day, about building a family based on love and commitment, not obligation. There was no empty chair for my father, no moment of silence for absent family, just joy, celebration, and the people who'd earned their place in my life. It was perfect. At the reception, people kept approaching me. Hannah, I had no idea about your story. One of Nathan's cousins said, You handled that with incredible strength. A colleague from my architecture firm hugged me. I would have lost it completely. You were so composed. My college roommate, who'd known pieces of my history, squeezed my hand. Your uncle and aunt are amazing. That's what real love looks like. Several guests asked about David and Elizabeth, wanting to thank them for raising me. I watched as people gravitated toward them, offering respect and admiration. You raised an incredible young woman, someone told Elizabeth. She raised herself, Elizabeth replied graciously. We just provided the foundation. On social media, because of course people posted, the focus wasn't on the confrontation, but on the beauty of the ceremony. Photos of David walking me down the aisle, Nathan and me laughing during our first dance, the toast Elizabeth gave about chosen family. Nobody mentioned Thomas. It was as if he'd never been there. 3 days into our honeymoon, I received a text from Olivia. Hannah, I saw what happened. Someone recorded it and showed Mom. I'm so sorry for everything. You deserved better. You deserved parents who chose you. I'm glad you found them. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Thank you, Olivia. I hope you're okay. I am. I'm learning a lot about what real family means, about consequences, about showing up. I'm sorry I didn't understand before. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that's enough. A week after we returned from our honeymoon, a letter arrived at our apartment, handwritten from Thomas. I held it for a long time before opening it. Nathan sitting beside me, his hand in mine. Uncle David called 2 weeks after the wedding. I thought you should know Emily filed for divorce. I was silent for a moment. When? Last week. According to the filing, she cited irreconcilable differences, but my source says she told her lawyer that Thomas is unable to move forward and obsessed with fixing past mistakes. How do you know this? I have colleagues who work in family law. Word gets around. He paused. Olivia moved out too. She's living with Emily and Dorothy in an apartment across town. Is he alone? Completely. Dorothy left the same day Emily did. He's living in a small apartment now. Sold the house. Had to. Couldn't afford it on his own. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt sad. Hannah, you didn't cause this, David said, reading my silence. He made these choices long before your wedding. Emily was already unhappy. Your wedding just forced him to confront what he'd been avoiding. What happens now? He lives with the consequences. That's how accountability works. Elizabeth told me more when I visited for dinner that week. I heard from a former colleague of his. He's isolated. Most of his friends were actually Emily's friends, and they sided with her. The few people who knew about you giving him up, they're not sympathetic. Does he have anyone? I don't know. But Hannah, that's not your responsibility. You're not required to rescue him from the consequences of his own choices. She was right. But it didn't stop the small, stubborn part of me that remembered being 10 years old, watching him make pancakes on Sunday mornings back when he was still trying to be a good father. Before grief and pride and Emily's influence had twisted him into someone I didn't recognize. 3 months after the wedding, the letter arrived. It was handwritten, 6 pages, the script shaky in places, as if he'd been crying while writing it. Dear Hannah, I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just need you to know that I finally understand what I did to you. You were right at the wedding. I was selfish. I was weak. When your mother died, I felt like I'd lost my purpose. She was the strong one, the capable one. I was always in her shadow. And instead of stepping up to honor her memory by taking care of you, I chose the easier path. Emily made me feel needed. She made me feel like I could be the man of the house, the decision maker. And when she said having you around made it hard for us to move forward, I believed her. I told myself I was doing what was best for you, that David and Elizabeth could give you a better life. But I was lying to myself. I gave you away because it was convenient, because starting fresh was easier than dealing with grief and responsibility. I see that now. I see how I failed you, how I chose my own comfort over my daughter's well-being, how I let Emily and Dorothy convince me that you were the problem when really I was. Emily left me because I couldn't stop thinking about you, because every time I saw a young woman your age, I wondered what you were doing, who you'd become. She said I was living in the past. Maybe I am, but the past is where I made the biggest mistake of my life. I don't want anything from you. I don't want money or time or reconciliation. I just want you to know I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry, and I'm proud of who you've become even though I had nothing to do with it. Thomas, I read the letter 3 times, cried a little, but I didn't respond. That letter was closure I didn't know I needed, but it didn't change my decision. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? How did it turn out? Please share in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Now, let me share what I learned from all of this. I used to think family was about blood, about DNA and last names, and who you look like in old photographs. But Uncle David and Aunt Elizabeth taught me otherwise. Family is about showing up. It's about choosing someone every single day, especially when it's hard. It's about sacrifice and commitment and love that doesn't come with conditions. David and Elizabeth could have said no when Dad asked them to take me. They could have offered temporary help a few months while he got on his feet. Instead, they opened their home permanently. They rearranged their lives. They paid for therapy and college and all the little expenses that come with raising a teenager. They never asked for gratitude, never held their sacrifice over my head, never made me feel like a burden, and they never tried to replace my mother. Mom's photos stayed on the mantle. They talked about her often, her sense of humor, her business acumen, her love for me. They helped me remember her as a real person, not just a ghost of grief. Your mother would want you to be happy, Elizabeth told me once. Not stuck in the past, but moving forward with people who love you. That's what real parents do. They don't compete with memory. They honor it. I still call them Uncle David and Aunt Elizabeth. Not because they're not my real parents. They absolutely are. But because those titles represent the choice we all made. They chose to be my parents. I chose to let them. And that choice renewed every day is stronger than any biological connection. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. If you're struggling with family dynamics, remember this. You're allowed to choose who gets access to your life. You're allowed to build your own family from people who actually show up for you. Some people thought I was cruel for not giving Dad a second chance. I heard the whispers at the wedding, saw the comments on social media posts. She should forgive him. Everyone makes mistakes. Family is family, but boundaries aren't about cruelty. They're about protection. I did forgive my father. I had to for my own mental health. Carrying anger and resentment was poisoning me, making me suspicious of everyone who tried to love me. So I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Both can be true at the same time. I can forgive him for being weak, for choosing the easy path, for prioritizing his new wife over his grieving daughter, and I can also choose not to have him in my life. Elizabeth explained it to me once during one of our many conversations about boundaries. Forgiveness is about releasing yourself from the burden of anger. Reconciliation is about rebuilding trust. One is a gift you give yourself. The other is something that has to be earned. Dad never earned it. He sent emails and made phone calls, but he never did the actual work of accountability. He never went to therapy to understand why he made those choices. He never made amends to Uncle David and Aunt Elizabeth for putting them in that position. He never truly apologized. Not until that letter. And by then, it was too late. Saying no to someone who hurt you isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to say, I forgive you, but I don't want you in my life. You're allowed to build walls around your heart and only let in people who've proven they won't break it. That's not being cold. That's being wise. My father's loneliness isn't my fault. It's the natural consequence of his choices. That's a hard truth, but it's important. When Dad signed those adoption papers, he thought he was solving a problem. He thought he could start fresh with Emily, build a new family, and leave the complicated grief of losing Mom behind. He didn't consider that choices have consequences, that relationships require maintenance, that you can't just opt out of fatherhood and expect to opt back in when it's convenient. The clause Uncle David added to the adoption agreement wasn't about punishment. It was about accountability. It was a way of saying, if you walk away, you need to understand the weight of what you're walking away from. Dad didn't read it, didn't take it seriously. And now, 12 years later, he's facing the bill. Not just financial, but emotional and social. Emily left him because he couldn't let go of his guilt. His friends distanced themselves when they learned the truth. Olivia is processing her own complicated feelings about the role her family played in my abandonment. Those are consequences, not revenge, not punishment I orchestrated, just the natural result of his actions catching up with him. And that's how it should be. If there were no consequences, people wouldn't learn. They'd keep making the same selfish choices, hurting the same people, and expecting forgiveness without change. Uncle David taught me this. Compassion doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their choices. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone face the results of their actions. That's how growth happens. I'm not happy that Dad is alone, but I'm not responsible for fixing it either. He made his choices. Now he lives with them, and I live with mine, surrounded by people who chose me, who love me, who show up. I'm 24 now, married to a man who sees me as a partner, not a project. I work as an architect for a firm that values creativity and innovation. I design spaces where families can build memories, homes with big kitchens for Sunday dinners, living rooms with built-in bookshelves, bedrooms with window seats perfect for reading. I design the kind of home I found with David and Elizabeth, the kind of home my father couldn't give me. Nathan and I are talking about having kids someday. When we do, David and Elizabeth will be grandparents. Not great uncle and great aunt, but grandma and grandpa. They've earned those titles. I still think about my biological father sometimes. I wonder if he's okay, if he's found peace, if he's learned anything from losing everything. But I don't feel guilty anymore. I don't lie awake at night wondering if I should have given him another chance. I chose peace over guilt, and that's made all the difference. Last week, Elizabeth and I were having coffee when she said something that stuck with me. You know what makes me most proud? Not that you succeeded despite what happened, but that you learned to recognize real love when you saw it. Some people spend their whole lives chasing after people who don't value them. You knew when to walk away. She's right. I learned early, painfully, but clearly that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice. It's action. It's showing up even when it's hard. My mother showed me that in the years I had with her. David and Elizabeth showed me that for 12 years. Nathan shows me that every day. And my father, he showed me what love isn't. That lesson, as brutal as it was, might be the most valuable thing he ever gave me. If you're in a situation where you need to set boundaries with someone who hurt, you know this. You're not being cruel. You're being wise. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to walk away from people who don't value you, even if they're family, especially if they're family. And if you found people who choose you every day, who show up when it matters, who love you without conditions, hold on to them. Celebrate them. Build your life around them. Those are your real family. I didn't need my biological father to walk me down the aisle. I had the man who raised me, who chose me, who loved me unconditionally standing beside me in that garden. And that was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it helps someone out there who's struggling with similar decisions about family, boundaries, and forgiveness. I'd love to hear your story. Have you ever had to set boundaries with a parent or family member? How did it turn out? What did you learn? Share your experience in the comments. I read every single one, and your story might help someone else who's going through something similar. If this story helped you in any way, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up. It's who stays. It's who chooses you when choosing you is hard. And you deserve people who choose you every single day. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being part of this community where we can talk honestly about the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of family and boundaries and love. Take care of yourselves and remember, you're worth choosing.